Hello and welcome to exercise application video number 20. So 2020. I just got done with a back and bicep workout in the gym, and so we're going to chat about that. So as I've talked about in the past videos, as we're exercising, we're accumulating acid. We're accumulating that as we hydrolyze ATP, as we convert pyruvate into acetyl-CoA to go into Krebs, that intermediate there, as we produce carbon dioxide. Well, that's what I just talked about. Excuse me, I'm losing it. During Krebs, we produce some acid. We have lots of sources of acid, long story short, in the body. And in my last video, I talked about how we buffer that in the muscle. And essentially, our muscle says, let's make it someone else's problem. So we use those transporters to kick it out. So we can various things, like things like our monocarboxylic acid transporter. We have different mechanisms of getting the hydrogen and the lactate out. So our lactate, like I mentioned in my last video, goes to our liver, where it is then brought through a form of gluconeogenesis, the Cori cycle, where it's converted back into glucose and thus recycled through glycolysis. But then we get lactate and hydrogen ions, and our blood has to deal with that then. And that's a pretty big deal because that's our systemic circulation. So we have to do something, or we will very quickly fatigue, because hydrogen and acidity, our body prefers more basic environment. So what we do is we actually use carbonic acid and its conjugate base, which is bicarbonate. So in the red blood cell, because we're going through that capillary that is perfusing between the muscle and it's diffusing between the muscle and the capillary, we get those hydrogen ions, and we also get carbon dioxide that we've produced from converting a pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. And so what we do then is, since our blood is mainly water, carbon dioxide and water forms carbonic acid in the red blood cell. And then what happens is that dissociates into a hydrogen ion and bicarbonate, which is the conjugate base. It's different by one hydrogen ion. That hydrogen ion then binds to hemoglobin, which is a protein. Essentially, it becomes denatured, gives us oxygen, which I'll talk about, I think, in my next video. That's why we get our oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, which relates to our respiratory system. But then we're left with that bicarbonate. That bicarbonate then moves from inside the red blood cell out to the blood plasma. And from there, it is free to pick up our hydrogen ions that we've shuttled into the blood from our muscles. And what happens is those hydrogen ions become bound up. So they're still present in the body, but when they're bound up, our pH, our body, is buffered from the effects of that acidity. It is similar to what we talked about with testosterone. When it is bound up, it's not affecting your numbers for testosterone. So it protects us, and that's the whole idea of a buffer system. It is not able to exert its effects or as maximally. So because carbonic acid is a weak acid in the blood plasma, it is not going to really want to dissociate, so we're safe from the effects of that hydrogen, and thus even further lowering our pH and causing fatigue. So then what we do, because it's a weak acid and it is not dissociating completely, everything is kind of reversible. So just as we got the CO2 plus H2O, carbonic acid, and then dissociating further, we can go back in towards the reactants originally. So we end up with CO2 and H2O, which we then exhale out through our lungs. So the diaphragm is relaxing, which brings it back upwards. Our intercostals are coming in. So it all starts to tie together around here. But as we exhale, we actually do get some water in there. If you were to put saran wrap, which I don't recommend, around your mouth and breathe out, you would see some water droplets, as well as carbon dioxide, which relates to all sorts of things like our RAR, but that is how we buffer acid in the blood.